Hello students, this is your teacher Mrs. Eagleson, and today we're going to go through chapter 4 section 1. First, what we're going to talk about is how the model of the atom has changed throughout time, and first we're going to talk about ancient Greeks, which were about 2,500 years ago, so this was a long time ago. There was this guy named Democritus, and he was the first one to develop the idea of the atom. And to him, the atom came from a Greek word called atomos, and so it's shortened to atom, and it just means uncut or indivisible. Unfortunately, after Democritus was there, then Aristotle came around and said that Democritus is wrong, and he thought that all things were made up of 4 elements: air, earth, water, and fire, and that kind of set the world back for a long period of time. Then it wasn't until the early 1800s that we've developed the theory of the atom, and that was thanks to Dalton. Dalton's theory of the atom had 4 main points. He thought that all elements are composed of atoms. Remember, atoms was the smallest part of matter. And atoms of different elements have different masses. So every element had different atoms, and those atoms had different masses. He also thought that compounds contain atoms from more than one element. And lastly, atoms in a compound always combine in the same way. So they would have the same ratio. So when water combines together, it always has 2 hydrogens with 1 oxygen. Dalton, those were the 4 main points of Dalton's theory. Based off of through this, Dalton thought that atoms were solid spheres. After Dalton, Thomson came along, and he came along in the late 1800s, and he used a cathode ray tube and he discovered subatomic particles. He stated that the atom was made up of a positive and negative charges, making an atom neutral. And he developed the plum pudding model. He thought that atoms were hollow sphere with positive and negative particles evenly spread out through the atom. And it pretty much looked like that picture at the bottom of the screen, where you've got your plum pudding was like the pudding part was the positive charge, and then the plums were the negative charges. He actually discovered the electron, which is the negative charge. Then Rutherford came along. He came along in the late 1800s to early 1900s, and he had a famous gold leaf experiment where he shot off alpha particles at some gold leaf and then saw how they deflected with the screen. He proposed the nucleus of a positively charged particles and an atom of mostly space. Based off of he thought that if the nucleus was a marble, the electrons would be 150 feet away. So he believed that here in the center of the atom was the nucleus with positively charged particles, and then outside was the electrons. So the electrons were negatively charged and those were outside. Remember, J.J. Thomson's the one that discovered the electrons. Rutherford just put those outside the nucleus. And he believed that if the nucleus was the size of a marble, the first electron closest to the nucleus would be 150 feet away. The nucleus is actually a lot smaller than that. That is it for today's notes.